Hello, happy Wednesday, welcome. I'm Liz, and thank you for joining me. If you are joining me live, just pop me a quick hello if you don't mind. And if you're catching the replay, just let me know that you're watching the replay. And I wanted to talk today about the stories that we tell ourselves. And so this has come up for me a couple of times over the past week. Actually, I had my own experience of it, and a couple of my clients we were talking about the same thing. So this is, you make these assumptions, and we start generating outcomes and stories. So it's like, oh well, this happened, and something triggered me, and then we go into these potential outcomes and stories in our heads that start spinning. And what's really interesting is that if you're starting to recognize when you start with the stories in your head, and you sort of, I used to be the person that, I'd have plan A, then I'd have plan B, and then I'd probably have a plan C, just because I've already got all of the potential outcomes figured out already before the event has actually happened. And so what we're ending up doing is we're making assumptions about what's going to happen in the future, where we actually have no control over what happens in the future. And the interesting thing about this is that we have the power to really show up differently. And if you start to notice that there's a story that starts running through your head, and this is, maybe there's a conflict, maybe you're having issues with, maybe you got the kids, and or a partner, spouse, or maybe there's a work disagreement. Something is just not sitting with you, and you start running the stories. And it's like, you can actually, if you become a kind of an observer, sort of remove yourself outside of your body and start watch what happens. And it's like, I call it kind of like the cyclone effect. It sort of gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and all of a sudden it gets, honestly, I was doing this with myself over the past weekend. It gets almost ridiculous, and you're kind of noticing what's happening with these stories that are going through your head, and you're like, what is going on? And you're looking at your watch, like, how much time have I wasted running these story outcomes? And so there's a couple of things here. One is, you have the opportunity to show up differently and change the outcome. And the second part of this is, the stories that are running through your head are based on your past experiences. And your past experiences have already happened. And you can check back with those past experiences, and what was the outcome? And were you happy with the outcome? Or do you want to change the outcome? And use that to go forward. So if you notice that there's these stories that are running through your head, it's like, oh, I did this, and they're going to show up, and they're going to tell me this, and then I'm going to do this, and I'm going to say this because they're going to say that. But then they might say this, but I'm going to be ready because I'm going to have this ready. And I'm going to say this, or I'm going to do this. And it's just like, whew. So it's like, even going through that example, you start to notice the energy. It's like a big time suck plus an energy suck. It really is, because your whole body, you notice the shift in energy. You get tense. It's like you guard. And I was chatting with a client the other day, and we were talking about this exact scenario where she's like predicting the outcome. She knows what they're going to say, and it's like, she's going to say this, and I already know. And I said, well, how can you show up differently? Well, I can show up calm and relaxed, but then they're going to say this. So she like, it's one thing to just say that, okay, well, I'm going to show up calm and relaxed and just cool, right? But if you already have the stories running through your head, but you're telling yourself you're calm and relaxed, it's not going to work, because the energy is not there. And you know the energy's not there because you just have to drop into your body. And it's just like, okay, what's going on? Am I feeling tense? Am I feeling like, is my jaw clenching? Am I sort of holding everything? Am I bracing? And so with my client, I said, okay, so how do you feel in that moment when you are getting prepared to have that conversation or do that thing where you've already made up that story? And she said, "Oh well, I know I feel tense." And it's like, yeah, you'll feel tense. And so if you are already showing up feeling tense, what does that look like to the other party or the other person? Well, so are you able to sort of step outside of your body and sort of look at yourself? So I envision it as like, well, it's like, you know, you watch the movies and you see the victim walking down the dark alley and they're like, ooh, somebody's going to attack me, but they're all alone, but somebody's going to attack me. And what do they look like, right? It's like they got this big freaking button on them that says, here, I'm a victim, get me, right? It's the same thing with stories. So if you're already talking yourself in the outcome and figuring it out and the stories, and you're going to be showing up in that energy. And the biggest shift that we can do, and this is a little bit of emotional intelligence and just sort of stepping back. And I used to talk to my clients in my world of, this is my previous life, the world of labor relations and grievances. So this is where this basically you're sitting on one side of the table and the other party is sitting on the other side of the table and you're arguing. You're arguing about a grievance. A grievance is basically an argument. I have an issue with something and we have to try and figure out a resolution. And I remember this one time that I was representing my clients and the employer's on the other side of the table. And this client, so I talked to her before, and the stories that she came up with about her manager, who she had the grievance with, were unbelievable. It's like if I went into her brain, into her library of stories, she would have had like a vault of encyclopedias of stories just about this one person. That's taken up a lot of room. Like if you think about it, use that analogy. How many encyclopedias of stories are you holding on to in your memory banks? And this is all energy as well. So this member, so I'm witnessing this exchange between my client and her employer around this grievance. And I swear, it's like you got in and they sat down, we opened up the conversation, and even before they started talking, the energy between the two of them was like you could cut it with a knife. And they were just like, right? And it was like, whoa, this is crazy. So I'm out. I'd call recess. I'm out talking to my client. I'm like, I want you to try something. How about before you say something, take a split second and imagine you're watching yourself and you're hearing what's coming out of your mouth before you say it. And I said this to her and she's like, oh, okay. And I said, this is something you need to practice. And going home, talking in front of a mirror. Facebook Live is great for this because we're constantly watching ourselves. We're constantly seeing ourselves talk. And when you're not actually seeing yourself and how you are, your body language, your nonverbal communication, you don't see the non-physical, the nonverbal communication of what you're saying. So showing up differently, and this client, going back to my story, sorry, sidetrack, we did a little bit of work. I did a little bit of practicing with her about, taking that split second of really considering what her reaction. So if you're backed into a corner, what is your true colors and who are you in that sort of screaming from the corner, scratching to get out, and recognizing that that's kind of your defense mechanism, your the last resort, You don't want to go there. You want to step up. You want to be the one to lead. Lead by example. Show up differently. Say something that's different so that the words and the energy that you give elicit a different response. And it's an amazing thing. So this particular client that I had, so we had a conversation outside of the meeting, and I said, I want you to try this. I want you to go in there, take a breath. Before you respond, check in with your energy, check in with yourself, and find that peace. Find something different to come with instead of attack. Find some softness, find some compassion. And before you respond, check in with yourself, and do you actually want to say that thing that you thought you were going to say initially? So we went back into the meeting and we sat down, and I could see her employer, the manager, bracing. I could actually see her body language on the other side of the table. And she was ready. She was ready for the attack. And I was so proud of my client because I saw her, I felt her energy just settle. I saw her body language just sit back. She wasn't like this, ready to jump. She actually sat back, relaxed, and what came out of her mouth was completely unexpected from her manager. And it was like a completely different conversation. And she showed up differently. So her communication and her energy was different. So the reaction matched it. So that's what we're trying to do. So the stories that we generate are only in our head. They're not reality. And so if you catch yourself spinning that cyclone of stories, notice the energy, notice like the cyclone, that whole energy of sucking the vortex. It's like pulling all that energy up. What a waste. Where else could you be sending that energy? On yourself, your loved ones, wherever. Check in. How can you shift? How can you change the story? How can you show up differently? Give it a try. You will be amazed at the outcome. And this is, we all do this. We all have stories. I do it. But we can change. We can check in and we can change. We can show up differently. Give it a try. Notice what happens. I would love, if you do try, I want to hear how it changed. Give me the Goals Notes version. I would love to hear this, because this is like, it's so easy to get caught up in the stories, but it's such an easy shift to do, to change and to show up differently. But the outcome is going to be more than you imagined. So give it a try. Send me a message, write something in the comments. I would love to hear. And enjoy the rest of your week with that thought. We'll talk soon.